It is true that the majority of engines I've torn down on this channel didn't really get their fair shot at a long life. Many of them were neglected, they were abused, they were worked on by people that had no business working on them, or driven by people that had no business driving them. But what happens when we get an engine that has failed prematurely and it's been dealer serviced its entire life? When it's had 3,000 to 4,000 mile oil changes from day one and only 2 owners, one of them was a lease, the second one was a personal vehicle. Well, that's what we're going to tear down today. It's an engine that many of you have been requesting. It is the Volvo twin-charged 2-liter 4-cylinder. This is the B4204T27 out of a 2016 Volvo XC90, and it has just 125,000 miles on it. Now, I know a lot of you are saying that 125,000 miles is pretty good in this day and age. Well, no. Now, the other side of the coin here is that because this is a European engine and it is also designed to be used in Europe, this is a global engine, and in many parts of the world, engines or vehicles are taxed based on their displacement. You have to get the most out of what you can. In this case, there's a supercharger and a turbocharger bolted to this thing to create 316 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. Now, that's pretty good. That's pretty healthy. Imagine if it was on a bigger engine. Volvo's B4204T27, lots of letters and numbers, is an engine that came out for the 2016 model year. You can get this engine in the XC60, the XC90, the S90, and the beautiful V90. And this engine is still in production today, and it is also the most powerful variant of this 2-liter. Someone is going to argue with me that the hybrid makes more. Yes, the car does, but the engine makes the same. I'm sure there are different revisions, different iterations of this engine in production now. Some changes have been made in the 9 years it's been in production, but this one has failed, and this is a core return, which means that someone purchased a used engine from a salvage yard that charged them a core charge, and when they brought back their old engine, they were refunded that money, and then I found it. That's how I got this engine. Now, how did I get the information on this engine? Well, Volvo, thankfully, on most Volvo engines from the mid-2000s and later have the VIN printed on the front of the engine. So as long as an engine isn't hit where that is printed, I will be able to get the VIN, run a Carfax, and get the details. And sometimes they report everything that's done to it, like in this case, all of the oil changes, all of the services, all of the stuff looks like it was done on time, and it is still bad. So that's what we're going to find out today. Why did this fail? Was it user error, driver error, or is it just a bad design? We're going to find that out today. This engine came in without a flex plate or any type of flywheel on it, which leads me to believe that it will turn over. There are also no spark plugs in it, so this should just easily turn over with no abnormal noises. And it, for the most part, does. Uncle Rodney's sleeping. Tucked away tight. I don't feel any tight spots. Everything seems to be pretty good. Something else worth mentioning here is that this thing looks like it has been leaking for some time. This doesn't happen overnight. This happens over years. And it looks like it's been leaking out of this crankcase component right here. It looks like it just drips down and collects here. Now there's also a bunch of oil, wet oil in this area, and I don't really know what happens with these cores. They're not always taken the best care of when they're being transported back to a salvage yard, which is why the oil cooler is so beat up. Let's take a look down those intake ports. Some of them look pretty good, and then that doesn't look so great. This thing definitely could have used an induction service, being direct injected and all. The next thing I'd like to do is pull the supercharger off, which looks like it's really easy to remove. Famous last words. There's these long through bolts. Oh, okay. I need an extension. I can't imagine that's it. That was way too easy. Oh, that literally was it. Looks like we've got a bracket here. Next, we're going to take the outlet off the supercharger so we can take a look at the blower itself. Now, if there was a bunch of debris run through here, you'd definitely see marks. So this is clutched. There's a connector up here on the other side of this. So I can't really turn it over with the pulley. But this all looks pretty good. I don't see any big gouges or scratches. There's really no damage worth mentioning. These things are pretty obvious when there's been debris run through them, and I just don't see it here. This looks good. Next, the turbocharger. We'll start with the heat shield. Well, I already see it bad. It's a broken off exhaust manifold bolt. So that's never a good sign. And it's clearly leaking exhaust in this area. It's probably making some noise too. Hopefully that's not why they replaced the engine. The next first thing I'd like to do is remove the coolant lines from the turbo. I think we need blue for that. Oh, it's making a mess. And then we have, oh, the oil drain is disconnected from the turbo already. Huh, this is getting suspicious. And the oil feed. There's a vacuum line on the wastegate. This is the right tool for the job, clearly, because it worked. Now we can unbolt the turbo from the head. That wasn't tight. And the turbo is off. You can see right here how that broken stud created an exhaust leak. Right there. Let's check this turbo out. It spins nice. There's no excessive shaft play, and the impeller does not hit the compressor housing. Let's see what the exhaust side appears like. Well, it's not sopping wet with oil, so that's a good sign. You can definitely tell that this whole side was cooked with exhaust leak. Look at all that. That's all charred and black. I'm sure that does that area well. Time to zip the crank pulley off. Look how easy that was. A comment I get pretty often is that you need to show the engine in time. As you can see, there's the line. Hold on a second, guys. There we go. You can see the timing mark is lined up. And you can see up here, the little bitty notch is lined up there. And the one at the back of that cam gear is lined up right there. So this engine is in time. Now I need to remove these little caps. These are pretty easy as I strip this one. What the? Well, that's unhappy. That's going to make this fun. Now, they're just flimsy caps. Man, why does... Those are really tight. Why? There is one more thing we can do. If this doesn't do it, it should have. A little center punch. And this one's kind of tricky here. Oh, we got it. Perfect. So before I go ripping the belt off, I'm going to get these cracked loose so that way I'm not trying to turn the cams over. Don't want to make pistons hit valves or valves hit pistons. Now we can peel this belt off. Did that help me? What about this? Oh yeah. Look at that. Now here's the timing belt. And I will say that I did not see a timing belt service in its Carfax. And this definitely has some wear on it, like it is original. It's not coming apart, but if you go like this, you can kind of see some small cracks in it. So it was definitely due for a timing belt. I'm not sure what the service interval is. I think it's like around this time, 100,000 miles, 120,000. Should have gotten a belt. Next, we'll get the cam gears off. The oil looks pretty good. It's coming out so far. Let's go ahead and get this inner timing cover off. Let's get this out of the way first. Is that it? I think that's it. That's it. Missed a bolt at the top and broke the already broken inner timing cover. Now we're going to start stripping down the valve cover. We'll start with this crankcase ventilation component. I don't actually know what it's called. It's some sort of CCV breather. All I know is it's coming off. And it looks like we still got some oil in there. The oil doesn't look too terrible. Next we have this boost management system. There's the boost control solenoid. I assume this is a vacuum chamber. Now the variable valve timing solenoids. They look pretty clean. They look to be original as well. I don't see any issues there. Next, we will remove the vacuum pump. This part sucks. Next, it's time to remove the fuel rail, and hopefully the injectors come with it. Oh, I think they will. Will they? Wait, what just happened here? I don't understand what just happened. I pulled this up and liquid came running out of the front of the block. What? It looks like these will come out. I am so confused right now. I can't even explain what is happening. Oh, I guess the injectors are gonna stay in the head. Yeah, every single injector is gonna stay in the head, so I need to remove all the clips from the rail. I really don't get what just happened with the fluid coming out of the front of the block. I'm perplexed. Oh, that broke. Christmas tree clips. Oh, they can just go like that? All right, there's the rail. Now we can get the valve cover off. I still don't understand. So as soon as the rail came off the injectors, a bunch of fluid, and I'm assuming it's fuel because it looks like fuel and smells like fuel. I haven't tasted it yet. Came out of this area, and it looks like there's like weep holes between the block and the head, but that makes no sense. We'll have to see what it looks like when the head comes off. Now we need to cram the valve cover bolts loose. The valve cover has the cam caps built into it. And this is not something that's new. Volvo's done this for a very long time, so it's not that weird. It's not that weird, I promise. So we got to crack these loose, and it could be that the camshafts stay in the valve cover. I think that was the last 2 liter I did. So let's see how this comes apart. Hopefully I didn't miss any. Let's zip them out. All right, I got them all. Now how do we get that off? So they give you a place to pry right here. Whoa! That was violent. that was bad. So that should not have happened, but it did. Now we can pull the camshaft slightly more gently than we just tried. So let's take a look at the cylinder head. So this is not really a journal as such because there's a roller bearing on the camshaft that fits there. And all the buckets seem to be in pretty good shape. I don't really see a ton of damage in here. Nothing that screams oiling related failure. I don't see any bits of forbidden glitter. There's no sparkles. This looks really good. And the same can be said about the valve cover. Cam caps, cam cover. I don't see any damage whatsoever. It looks good. So here's those roller bearings. I love this idea. I don't know whether they last longer or not, but definitely reduces friction and dependency on oil pressure. Now what's interesting is the cam lobes themselves are kind of discolored, except for where they make more contact with the valve spring, or there's more force in the valve spring. So it kind of tells me, especially when you get back here, that if the valves, I think they're hydraulic. I don't think you can adjust these. We'll look in a second. But it could be that there's kind of a gap between the cam lobe and the lifter. And as the lobe builds, it makes contact. And that tells me that would be kind of clattery. There's no way you wouldn't hear that. And that's pretty much uniform on this entire engine. This is the first sign of anything wrong that I've seen. And I don't know that it's that wrong. It might just be a characteristic of these engines. I don't really have a lot of experience working on or driving them, so I can't tell you if they're noisy engines or not. But I'm sure some of you that watch this video have owned or do own one of these. And just tell me in the comments, is this normal? Do they make a bunch of lifter noise? I just can't imagine a Volvo of all cars being a loud engine. So I just retrieved one of these buckets. And I don't see any issues here. But it could just be that the valves aren't closing correctly. You would think it wouldn't run though. That just might be a characteristic of this engine. Before we go pulling the head bolts out, we have some tubage and pipage to remove. Is that it? Oh yeah, that's it. Time to break the head bolts loose. And for those wondering, this takes an M12 triple square. I'm not sure if I can retrieve these that easily. Oh, I think I can. I think I spoke too soon. This one just need a little coercing. All right, what's behind the cylinder head? Well, there's a head gasket. It looks nice. Now one of these does not look like the other. I think number 3 is a little too clean for me. I don't see any deformation on the crown, the cylinder wall. The cylinder wall looks pretty good. This all looks pretty decent. But having one clean piston is
very suspicious.
Suspicion aside, it's time for some science. So it all sounds pretty good. Oh, now I did it. Yep. So let's take a look at the combustion chambers. Cylinder 1 looks pretty average. Cylinder 2 looks good. Now keep in mind, cylinder 3 was the problem. You guys see it? Yeah, I'll help you out a little bit. She's got burned valve. That's not good. And cylinder 4 looks okay. I don't see any signs of piston to valve contact. I don't see any issues there. I just see the burned valve, and there could be more damage in this engine because, well, that metal had to go somewhere. Now it's time to turn this thing over so we can pull the oil pan. I hope this engine's drained. We're going to find out real quick. Now, there's some oil coming out. It's not a lot, though. All right, now we're getting a little excessive. Yeah, it's too much. Nah, I don't think this thing was that full. It didn't say drained on it, at least. While this thing is draining, I'd like to take a moment and talk about business ethics. So when I find a failure like we just found where it had a burned valve, the first thought that runs through a lot of your heads, and my head as well, is, well, this is probably in great shape. You should just stop where you're at and sell this as a good short block, which I could do. I could absolutely do that, but something caused that valve to burn. Whether it was an internal source or an external source, we don't know yet. And without taking this apart to find out, selling this, an engine I couldn't hear run, I didn't do the diag on, and I just found a burnt valve on, it's a giant question mark. I don't do that. I can sleep better knowing the exact condition of all of the parts on the inside when I know all the condition of the parts on the inside. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to tear it down. I know I could probably put a head on this engine and sell it. These engines are $4,500 plus. I could definitely come out okay on this, but I'd rather sell it in parts and know that I did the right thing. Let's pretend for a minute that I have the socket to fit this. Which I don't. You guys always tell me I don't know what I'm doing with channel locks. Like I don't know how to use channel locks at all. Does that make you mad? How about now? Is that better? That is full of oil. Oil looks really clean. Next, we'll get the oil cooler out of the way. Now, just a few 10 millimeters. Let's see, this should just pop right off. It doesn't seem to want to do that. I didn't miss any bolts. Let's try a chisel driver. Oh, I think I got it. We're leaking. So let's check out the inside of the pan. And there's definitely some sludge-related stuff in here. I don't think any of that stuff is loose, though. Let's look down here. Oh, maybe that's just bubbles. It's definitely a little sludgy, but I don't see any debris. I don't see any forbidden glitter either. Although it's kind of interesting that the drain bolt is just slightly higher. So every time you drain the oil, you can't really get all of it out. As you can see, that's just a little above the bottom surface. It should point down. And inside the pan, we have the balance shaft cassette. There's our oil pump, and there's the pickup tube. Screen looks nice and clean. This all looks pretty decent in here. There's a little bit of varnish. It's a little discolored. But nothing too wild. This all looks pretty good. A lot better than last week's engine. Next, we'll get the pickup removed. And now the oil pump sprocket. Now there is a connector for the oil pump that runs through the block. I don't like this. I also don't like when my socket murders itself. I don't know what it was, but I can tell you after I'm done, this is going to be a T40. Now, I don't know what it takes to get this through. We're going to find that out. what is going on here? There's not another connector in here that I can see. And this is definitely not, oh, I see. It's covered in oil, by the way. I don't know what it takes to get this apart, but I can do it. The idea here is to not put a hole in my hand. I feel like I maintain pretty good goals in life. Perfect. Okay. And the oil pump is off. So let's take a look at this oil pump. Looks like it's a variable oil pump. Looks like it's in pretty good shape, and honestly, because I have seen no signs of oil-related failure here or oiling failure, and I do believe I can sell this pump, I'm not going to take this apart. I know that might break your heart, and I am sorry. It's not the goal. However, I do see comments when I mention this that what about taking it apart ruins it? Well, it doesn't ruin it, but these shouldn't come apart unless you suspect there's a problem. And all of my potential buyers would probably not want to buy it after someone's been inside of it. So I'm going to leave this together. I believe we tore down the last Volvo oil pump. So if you want to see what that looks like, you can go to that video. Time to remove the balance shafts. Oh, that was bad. Nice and easy. I'm going to rotate this over one last time and get all the remaining residual oil out of it, because there still is some. By some, I mean more than there was last time. Let it drain for a minute. The next thing I'm going to do is crack all the rod caps loose, pull the rod caps, and then we can push the rods and pistons out of the top of the bore. Now we'll knock the rods and pistons out. Now we can start removing the bed plate bolts. We'll start with this front cover. That comes off. Next we'll do all the perimeter bolts. I almost said I made it through this whole teardown without the compressor turning on. And the compressor still hasn't turned on, so I think we're okay to say that. All right, I think we're about ready. I should probably get this sprocket off of this chain, don't you think? Let's get the bed plate off. I said let's get the bed plate off. This side is... There we are. Oh, I think I remember this. Something happens with this that I don't remember. Nothing happens with this. I'm just going to set blue in there. No, that's a bad idea.
What am I doing?
And now I think we can pluck the crankshaft onto the block. It's a nice remain seal. Well, let's start with the bearings. So the upper rod bearing shells have some moderate wear, but nothing is grooved. Nothing is really torn up. It's just a little wear. There might be a tiny hairline groove in that one, but these look really good, as do the main bearings. The main bearings are also in really good shape. This one here looks like a piece of debris ran through this journal, but nothing that would cause any significant problems. And because we didn't see any bearing damage, the crankshaft is in really good shape, which is not what we could say about the last Volvo 4-cylinder we tore down. And I'm excited to get one of these to sell. The last one went right to the scrap bin. Now let's get to something exciting. So the rods all look good. There's no issues there. But the pistons, there's some wear on the skirt, but look at the oil control ring. It's packed and it's tiny. It's so tiny. And look at the condition of the ring lands. There's cylinder 2. There's so much carbon buildup. You can barely tell that that's not one solid ring. That oil ring is just plugged solid. And when that happens, they chug oil. And when engines chug oil, especially forced induction, direct injected engines, well, things can happen. Bad things can happen, like a very burned exhaust valve. That is crazy burnt. It doesn't look like the seat took any damage. This is definitely a serviceable head. Obviously, you'd have to get a valve job, one new valve, have to check the condition of all of these valves, and then have the one bolt extracted. I'm not sure what the value of the cylinder head is, but I have everything to put it back together should I want to put a valve in it and get it fixed, if it's worth it. Let's get a better look at this oil ring. You guys like this close-up stuff. As long as I can get this thing to focus. That's pretty decent. So this thing is really plugged up. That gives you an idea on scale of how tiny this itty-bitty oil ring is. This is totally plugged up. Now, when I did the science test, you might have heard some clattering. That's just this. This is totally normal. It's just the design of the wrist pin. It's fine. Let's check out these bores. Hopefully it's not too boring. There's definitely some wear on the thrust side. It's not terrible. I have no idea what the block's worth, if it's worth anything at all. I may still have the one from the last one. Not saying that all 4204s are the same, but I don't see any major damage. As ironic as this is, I noticed that Dave's Auto Center put out a video on one of these superchargers where the electromagnetic clutch had failed. So we're going to open this up to see what it looks like, because I intend to sell this and I want to know what I'm selling. Oh, he doesn't like that. That's not good. Let's get a better battery. Oh, he doesn't like it. It's probably how long that socket is. Let's just crack these loose. I bet the other ones aren't so tight. No? Oh, that one can go. That stays in. What in tarnation? Oh, she's coming apart now. Oh no. Well, that's not good at all. So it's still in one piece, but it is heavily worn. And this is why I don't just like to sell stuff without looking at it. So this is the part that drives the blower here. And there's really negligible play in the coupler, but look at the surface of this. This is trashed. It's glazed, it's grooved, I can catch my fingernail on it, and there's the clutch. And basically what this does is, so this thing's not running all the time. It's only under certain throttle situations. You apply 12 volts to this, and it kicks the clutch into this while it's spinning, which is why it looks like this. Which ultimately means that instead of, this being a solid, consistent thing where it's always under boost, you only get boost when you need it, which is how a lot of the M112K, M113K Mercedes engines work. They're not under boost all the time, even though they're supercharged. And it's basically for fuel savings reasons, because if you're in boost all the time, you get terrible gas mileage, which these aren't really that great on fuel anyway. Regardless, this is not a part that lasts. Clearly, this is going to need some parts before it's sellable, or maybe I'll just sell it as a core. The 2-liter in late model Volvos is a high-stress engine. And what I mean by that is it's direct injected, so it's already a higher compression engine, and it's got a turbocharger and a supercharger cramming air down its throat to produce 316 horsepower out of just 2 liters of displacement. You're asking a lot out of a little, and it's not installed in some lightweight hot hatch. It's installed in the largest vehicles they make, like the XC90. So you're expecting a lot out of just a little. And I understand why they made it this way, but it has consequences when less than ideal situations occur. The margin of error with these engines is very thin, so anything less than perfect is broken. And that's what we saw today. Now this thing had signs that it was burning oil. The oil control rings were absolutely not doing their job. They should have been fired a long time ago. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a revised piston and ring design that the later model engines got that this one clearly didn't, or maybe it would have not led to this type of situation. But either way, anytime you enter oil into a combustion situation, it lowers the octane. And when you lower the octane, the risk of pre-ignition or detonation increases. And when that happens, well, you can burn pistons, you can burn valves, bad stuff happens, and that's what happened here. This thing melted a valve. Now, whether it melts a piston or it burns a valve is completely up to what part of the combustion cycle that the detonation occurs in, plus the timing. It could be the materials used. There's a lot of different variables there. Either way, this person was probably driving their well-maintained vehicle. It was maintained at the dealer. Great history. Don't often see that when I do a Carfax on engines that I'm tearing down. And especially with only 125,000 miles, you wouldn't think twice about passing somebody on the freeway that was going slow in front of you, or, I don't know, just flooring it to get on the highway. I wide open throttle my cars all the time. So I wouldn't think twice about that in a stock vehicle. And unfortunately, that was just the catalyst to the failure, which was led by the underlying issues of oil consumption. And what probably happened is it started misfiring, lights came on, they took it to a shop, they did a compression test, they condemned the engine. Now they could have put a valve in the head, but it didn't fix the oil consumption issues. It would have done it again anyway. They could have put pistons and rings in it, but when you figure the amount of time someone is without their car, plus the expense difference, I bet it's pretty close cost-wise to rebuild one of these engines versus spend the $4,500 to $5,500 on a used one. I would probably go with a used one, especially if you know that there's a bad piston design. You can hopefully buy an engine out of a newer one that already has that fixed. So, this is a kind of a different teardown because while I had lots of people request this, it felt like I was tearing down the same 2-liter I did from months ago because most of the engine architecture is the same. Unlike the one I did from a few months ago, I actually have parts to sell because the last one is trashed. This one has lots of really good parts. This will be a very lucrative core for me, which after the last couple weeks, I definitely needed. So if you'd like to buy any parts out of this engine or anything else I've torn down or out of this 2003 Wrangler automatic 2-door 4-wheel drive, I'll leave our email in the video description. You can also go to Importapart.com. I've been adding our parts cars every single week. We've got some pretty cool stuff in. I really hope you enjoyed this teardown as always. I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.